Hi, Bar. How's it going? Hey, what's up? Welcome to Pros with Peter. I want to talk to you today about overbuilding yeast starters so that you can get 3 or 4 uses out of that one packet of yeast you got at the homebrew store. All right, so what you're going to need to overbuild your yeast starter is obviously your essentials in cleaning and sanitizing. PBW should be in everybody's list. I like these big containers; they're a little more economic to clean all of your vessels before you do anything. And of course, sanitizer. I use Star San. Star San is kind of the go-to. It's always worked well for me, so I always keep a big thing of Star San on hand as well. All right, the next thing you're gonna need is dried malt extract. I pick up whatever the lightest one they have is. Dried malt extract is just fermentable sugars made from malt that you're gonna put into water to create basically a tiny beer. I always keep a spray bottle of sanitizer on hand. I just made new sanitizer today, so I used my gallon jug here to measure out a gallon of cool tap water and add just about 10 milliliters of Star San so that we can get a good concentration of Star San and sanitizer and know that this is fresh and working. The other thing, I always use a beaker. This one's full of warm water in PBW, and it's got a temperature indicator on there. I really like the beaker. It's got good measurements on it. I definitely recommend picking one of these up, but it's not absolutely necessary. And of course, we're gonna need a kitchen scale. Something that'll do grams is fine. If you're picking up a new one, I'd maybe say go for something that can do tenths of grams, but if you have one already, grams will be fine. Another thing I use in my yeast starters is yeast nutrient. Any yeast nutrient will do. It just gives the yeast every advantage so that you know that you are gonna have really healthy yeast to put in your beers. And I picked up a few of these little containers, but a mason jar or something similar will work great. Another crucial thing is something to label with. You wanna know what your yeast is, when you made it, when it's still viable, because if you do this a lot like me, you end up with yeast that's 6 to 9 months old and it might not be good anymore. If you're brewing pretty regularly or using the same yeast, it's great to have a little yeast bank to pull from, and knowing what you're pulling is crucial. The yeast I'm going to be using today is dry hop. It's by Imperial. I picked up this container and this pitch from a local brewery. I'm going to make sure that it's viable and hopefully turn it into 3 pitches. I'm letting it sit out of the fridge, but it's been in the fridge. You can see how well it's settled. But it's been in the fridge and now it's going to warm up and come to hopefully about 70 degrees. Set that aside for now. So this has been sitting in warm PBW just to make sure that it's super clean. I'm going to dump it out, rinse it, and add my water. Alright, that should be well rinsed. Okay, so now that it's clean, I'm going to fill it up to 1750 mils, that mark right there. This is 2,000 milliliter beaker, but it just gets a little full when it's all the way up there. So I like to do 175 just to give myself a little space. You're gonna wanna use water that you would be happy drinking. RO water would be great. Got a video about that. For the yeast starter, you can be a little less precious. I'm gonna use filtered water from our Brita. Wow, almost all of it. So for the dry malt extract, I always use a ratio of 1 to 10. So for 1,750 milliliters of filtered water, I'm gonna use 175 grams of dried malt extract. If you're doing 1 liter, 1,000 milliliters, you just do 100 grams. That follows, right? So I'm gonna measure out 175 grams of dried malt extract. This stuff is sticky and horrible. It wants to be liquid sugar so bad, but it will ruin you in your kitchen. Immediately makes a mess. Oh gosh. I hit 175 on the dot. Obviously I was going slow, but this isn't rocket science. If it's a little bit off, that's gonna be okay. Basically, turn this into a little beer. You're looking to have a starting gravity of about 1030 to 1040. If you've brewed before, you'll know that that's kind of low, and that's what we want. It's just some sugars to get the yeast started chewing on something so they can start to multiply. Like I said, this is probably going to be a pain in the butt to mix in, but it'll be all right. And then we're going to let it boil for about 10 minutes, and then we're just going to transfer it right back to the beaker that it came from. So this is Yeast Nutrient. I like this one. Why yeast? I'm just going to add a 1/4 teaspoon to our little boil about halfway through, and let it kind of make sure it mixes in. While keeping one eye closely on that, this is a good time to come sanitize your setup. So I have this nice big funnel, and spray that with some sanitizer, and grab some of this, the Star Sand concentrate that's also in there, and then maybe I'll set this here and just kind of shake it all around. Pour this back in here. Try and get out most of the bubbles, but it's Star Sand, it's food grade. You can get away with having a little bit of bubbles. I think they're saying it's like, don't fear the foam. This is not gonna hurt. We still have an eye on that because that's dangerous. Stir this occasionally. Now that we've completed our boil, we're considering things to be on the cold side. So cold side is after you've kind of cooled down, and that's when you need to worry a lot more about sanitation. I don't have the temperature of that, it's just off boil, so I bet it's still above 200. So as long as it's above 180, it'll still be sanitary. That's why maybe sanitizing this is not quite necessary, but in theory, everything cold side, post boil, you're gonna wanna have sanitary. Not just clean, but also sanitized, which are two separate steps all the time. Which is always exciting. All right, that's all in there. And be careful because your beaker will now be very hot. So normally when you're fermenting beer, you might have a blow off or an airlock. That's a way for the CO2 to escape without letting any oxygen back in. For the yeast starter, we're just gonna use aluminum foil. The yeast needs oxygen to grow. So normally you might use a stir plate. I find that it works just as well just by stirring this occasionally. Every time I walk by it, keep it in the kitchen in kind of a dark corner, but somewhere accessible. And you just swirl it around every time you have the chance, and that gets some oxygen in there and helps the yeast grow. While this is still hot, I'm gonna grab some aluminum foil, sanitize one side just to be safe, and push it down on there. And now we're gonna have to let this cool. So I'll probably run it through some cool water. If you have enough ice to make an ice bath, that'll make it go faster, and we'll get it down to, on this temperature gauge, probably somewhere around 70. All right, so this has now been cooling for just about an hour, and it got down to about 70 degrees. You can see, I think, up close that, thank you extra hands, that it is now about 70 degrees. And this is our yeast, and it's been coming up to temperature since we started the process. So now all we have left to do is to pitch this into here, and once that happens, as frequently as I can, I'm just gonna give this a good shake. We'll hopefully start to see some activity by tonight, big bubbles, and this is gonna change color. We'll get a shot of it now. It should change color, and you'll see how it ferments. So I'm gonna go ahead and carefully remove this, remembering that sanitation is key right now. You want to make sure that the bottom is clear of any yeast that might want to stick down at the bottom. And go ahead and open it up and dump it right in. Make sure it all gets in there. And then just a little more spray sanitizer. And we just put it right back on there. Seal it up a little bit, not too tight. You can see it's a little darker because of the yeast. But when we come back in a day or two, we'll have a nice big yeast cake on the bottom, and we can either pitch that right into your fermenting beer if you were doing a vitality starter. So a vitality starter, you would do the same process, maybe with a little less initial wort. And then once you see bubbling and activity, you can dump the whole thing right into your fresh wort that is full size, maybe 5 gallons, 10 gallons. This one, I'm not going to brew immediately with. I'm going to separate it out into some jars and save the yeast and pitch it later on. I'll probably do a vitality starter with what I end up with out of this, just to make sure that's good. I'll show you the progress and we'll show you how it works in the end. All right, so it's almost 4 p.m. This guy's been sitting here in the corner behind his little shawl for almost 4 hours. And you can see right here there's a little positive pressure. But when we shake it up, it's kind of creating a little more positive pressure, and look at all that foam. That's good signs of activity. And it's up from about the 68 to 70 zone to about 70, 72. When it's active, we'll warm up your wort. It's an exothermic reaction. I don't know a ton about chemistry. Is that chemistry? It's chemistry. But we'll put it back here and just keep stirring it up every 10 to 15 minutes or whenever you get a chance. If you don't do it like if you go to bed, if you do this the night before and you go to bed and you stir it up at 11 p.m. and then you wake up at 8, it's probably going to be fine. You're going to have a good fermentation going, and you're going to have more yeast than you started with. We'll check back in a little while. Au revoir. All right, so it's just about 48 hours after we started this process. So here's my yeast starter. It's been in the fridge overnight. You can see all the yeast is settled to the bottom. It may actually help me pour off all this beer, or a lot of it. And I'm going to pour off all the beer and be left with just the yeast. So now it's been a little bit of shaking, and I think we're almost there. You can see nothing stuck to the bottom, not a lot of big chunks floating around in there, so we have a nice cohesive slurry and lots of very healthy multiplied yeast that we can now split into our jars for saving. For this one, I don't think I need a funnel. For my smaller ones, I might. Now I'm going to dry that off. I'm going to label that with the manufacturing date and the date I did this, and keep it cold. Should be good to go for a while now. Wow, that looks pretty. I like that. Look at that. Yeast. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps you get the most out of your yeast. I'm going to be brewing with some of this week, so I can't wait. We got more videos coming your way. Brew days, experiments, exciting stuff. So stay tuned. Remember to like and subscribe, and let me know what you liked about this video or what you want to hear about in the future. Boo bitch.